I never envisioned myself as a strategist, but when a billion-dollar developer sets sights on your family's land, you quickly learn to anticipate their moves. My family's 20 acres have been cherished for generations. Rolling hills, a clear stream, and countless memories. This land doesn't just grow trees. My grandfather used to say it grows roots. When he passed and left me the property, I vowed to honor his words. Enter Victoria Steele, the face of Steele Development Group. The first time her sleek black Bentley navigated my gravel driveway and her designer heels sank into the soft earth, I knew trouble had arrived. Extending a manicured hand, she said, "Mr. Anderson, your property has potential. We're prepared to offer you $3 million. Her smile was polished but devoid of warmth as she handed me a gold-embossed business card. I declined politely. 3 weeks later, she returned with an offer of $4 million. Again, I refused. "You're making a mistake," she said, her tone losing its charm. "This land is perfect for our Grand Pines Resort. Think of the jobs we'll create, the tourism revenue. Don't be selfish." The narrowing of her eyes when I declined again told me this wasn't over. 2 days later, excavators appeared at the edge of my property. Workers in orange vests began clearing trees. When I confronted the foreman, he showed me permits approving construction 50 feet into what I knew was my land. "There must be a mistake," I said, heart pounding. "Take it up with the county." He shrugged, not even pausing his work. At the county office, I discovered my property line had been redrawn after an emergency zoning meeting I was never notified about. Steele Development had friends in high places. That night, as I watched floodlights illuminate the growing construction from my porch, Victoria's Bentley pulled up again. She stepped out, sunglasses perched on her head despite the darkness. "Change your mind yet?" she asked, looking at the machinery tearing into my land. "This is happening with or without your cooperation. $6 million, final offer." I felt my grandfather's voice in my head. "Sometimes, son, you've got to let the other guy think they've won." I took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eyes. "I need time to think." Her satisfied smirk told me she thought she'd broken me. She had no idea I was already plotting. The next morning, I called my old college roommate, Mark, now an environmental attorney known for taking down corporate giants. I put him on speaker while I made coffee, my hand shaking too much to hold the phone. "They're building on your land without legal permission." Mark's voice crackled through the phone. "Send me everything, property deeds, survey maps, photos of the construction, and document absolutely everything they do from now on. Business Insider plus 3 Action News Jacks plus 3 Villages News plus 3. That became my new full-time job. I installed trail cameras along my property line. I flew my drone over the construction site twice daily, capturing high-resolution video of their progress. I even bought a weatherproof notebook to record every conversation, every equipment delivery, every tree they cut down. Meanwhile, Victoria's resort grew like a cancer on my land. A massive wooden structure with 3 stories and what looked like water slides sprouting from the roof. Workers swarmed the site 24/7, and the constant drone of machinery became the soundtrack to my sleepless nights. 2 weeks in, Victoria showed up again, this time with an architect and what looked like potential investors. "Mr. Anderson," she called out, waving me over when she spotted me photographing the construction. "Come meet some people excited about the future of this property." I approached slowly, phone recording in my pocket. "These gentlemen are considering a partnership in Grand Pines," she said, her voice dripping with fake warmth. I was just telling them how supportive the local community has been. The men nodded, impressed by her lies. One of them, gray-haired and tan, extended his hand. "We're planning to make this the premier luxury resort in the state. The revenue projections are substantial." $6 million worth? I asked innocently. Victoria's smile tightened. "Actually, we've revised our offer to $5 million, considering how much we've already invested in development." That's when I realized their game. They never expected me to sell willingly. The plan was to build so much on my land that I'd have no choice but to accept whatever pittance they offered or face years in court, while my property remained unusable. "I'm still considering your offer," I said, forcing a defeated tone. How long until construction is complete? Victoria's eyes lit up with victory. Grand opening in 6 weeks. We've already booked the governor and several celebrities for the ribbon cutting. Perfect. I thanked them for their time and walked away, my heart hammering in my chest. That night, Mark called with news. The water testing came back, he said, his voice charged with excitement. Ethan, that stream on your property is home to an endangered salamander species, one that's protected under federal law. I felt a surge of hope. What does that mean? It means we have a nuclear option. But let's wait. Let them sink more money into this project first. For the next month, I played my part to perfection, the docile, defeated landowner who had finally accepted the inevitable. I waved to the construction crews. I brought Victoria coffee when she visited the site. I even handed brochures to her marketing team, filled with local attractions and history I knew by heart. All the while, my drone flew overhead twice a day, capturing every inch of the resort's illegal expansion. Trail cameras clicked silently in the woods, and my notebook swelled with meticulous details. Meanwhile, Mark was quietly building a case he called the most beautiful lawsuit I've ever drafted. 3 days before the grand opening, they erected a massive wooden sign at the newly paved entrance. Grand Pines Luxury Resort, soft opening this Friday. I snapped a photo and texted it to Mark. His reply came seconds later. Time to spring the trap. The morning of the grand opening, I wore the best suit I owned, a charcoal, gray tailored piece I hadn't touched since graduation. I clipped on my grandfather's old silver tie pin, the one he wore every Sunday, and stared into the mirror. It's just another move on the board, I whispered to myself. Then I stepped out onto the porch and watched the chaos unfold. SUVs and luxury sedans rolled in by the minute. Caterers set up silver trays under silk canopies. Waiters passed flutes of champagne across manicured lawns that had, just 2 months ago, been wild with knee-high golden grass and Queen Anne's lace. I spotted Victoria immediately, hard to miss in a bright crimson pantsuit, laughing gracefully while she led the governor of the state through the site. Her voice rang out, polished and practiced, as she schmoozed with investors and reporters alike. "You ready?" Mark asked, appearing at my side with a leather briefcase and 2 agents from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency flanking him like a pair of chess knights. "Born ready," I said, though my throat was dry. We waited until Victoria stepped up onto the small outdoor stage they'd erected near the entrance and tapped the microphone. "Welcome," she beamed, "to what will soon be the crown jewel of luxury hospitality in the state. Grand Pines represents a $6.2 million investment in this community's future." I smiled at the irony of that figure. "When we first discovered this hidden gem," she continued, gesturing toward the landscape behind her, "we knew the potential was limitless." Mark gave a nod. The agents and I walked forward through the crowd. Conversations faltered. Heads turned. People stepped aside instinctively. I could feel the weight of their attention building behind me like a storm front. "And now," Victoria said, "I'd like to invite our investors to—" "Excuse me." Mark's voice rang out, clear and firm, cutting through the crowd like a blade. "I'm Michael Ramirez, representing Mr. Ethan Anderson and the United States Environmental Protection Agency." Gasps rippled through the audience. Victoria froze, one hand still outstretched toward the governor. "This ceremony is now officially halted," said one of the EPA agents, stepping up beside Mark and flashing a badge. "This construction site has been found in violation of multiple federal environmental protections, including destruction of a critical habitat for an endangered species." Flashes went off as reporters swiveled their cameras toward us. Murmurs swelled like a rising tide. "There must be some mistake," Victoria said, her voice tight, her smile faltering but still clinging to her lips. "We have every necessary permit." "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "I have documentation proving this entire resort was built on illegally rezoned land." "My land." Mark opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound folder. "We've filed federal charges for environmental violations, fraudulent reassessment of private property and destruction of protected habitat. Effective immediately, construction is ceased and the premises are under investigation. Victoria's face drained of color. Her eyes flicked to the investors, who were already backing away from the stage, whispering urgently among themselves. "You," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You planned this. You let us build." "MS. Steele," the second agent interjected. "I suggest you refrain from making any further statements without legal counsel." Reporters surged forward, jostling to get closer. Microphones extended like antennae. The caterers began packing up trays, uncertain and alarmed. Guests looked to one another, unsure whether to flee or film. And then, from the edge of the stage, the governor stepped forward. Clearing his throat, he took the microphone. "In light of these serious allegations," he said, "I am directing an immediate state-level investigation into the permitting process that allowed this project to move forward. If there was any improper influence, the individuals responsible will be held accountable." Victoria swayed slightly on her heels, as if the weight of everything she'd built were pressing down at once. And maybe it was. I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to hear. "You know what my grandfather taught me?" I said softly. "Land isn't just about property. It's about respect. For boundaries, for people, and for the things that live here long before we do." Her eyes, wide and wet, met mine for one brief moment, and I saw it. Not just fury, not just disbelief. Something deeper. Something like shame. But I didn't stay to bask in it. The next several weeks were a whirlwind of news coverage, depositions, interviews. Blackwood, no, Steele, development stock plummeted. The scandal spread quickly when it came to light that Victoria had used the same manipulative tactics in other counties. Fast-track zoning, targeted pressure on local landowners, hush-hush permits approved in secret midnight meetings. The media dubbed it the land theft pipeline. Within a month, Victoria was facing federal charges. Steele Development filed for bankruptcy protection, and I was left with a strange situation, a half-built luxury resort on my land. "You could sell it," Mark suggested as we watched the sun set over the ghost site. "The materials alone are worth millions." "I could," I said, "but I won't." That night, unable to sleep, I walked the perimeter of the property with a flashlight. Construction debris crunched under my boots. I stood in what would have been the main lobby of the Grand Pines Resort and whispered to the shadows. "This land doesn't just grow trees, it grows roots." And suddenly I knew what to do. 3 months later, the steel beams and wooden skeletons had been transformed. Where Victoria had planned VIP suites, we built classrooms. The water slides now emptied into a natural pond surrounded by native plants. The Grand Pine sign had been repainted by local artists. It now read, "Fletcher Conservation Center," named after my grandfather. We used the settlement money, not just from the environmental suit, but from the insurance company desperate to distance itself from Steele Development, to fund the center. We offered free classes on land stewardship, scholarships for students studying environmental law, and preserved the salamander's habitat in perpetuity. Irony, it turns out, has a beautiful sense of humor. On our opening day, over 200 people showed up. Many had once worked on the original construction site. Now they were employees of the Conservation Center, restoring trails, teaching kids, building something with purpose. "Your grandfather would be proud," said Mrs. Jenkins, my old third-grade teacher, as she toured the new facilities. "I hope so," I whispered, tears threatening behind my smile. That evening, I wandered to the stream where it all began. The water was still cool and clear, trickling peacefully over smooth stones. A small salamander darted through the reeds, blissfully unaware of the chaos that had once threatened its home. I remember the last time I saw Victoria, being escorted from court after her sentencing. Gone were the suits, the sunglasses, the confidence. She looked hollowed out, older somehow. Defeated. 6 months house arrest, 5 years probation. Some said it was too lenient. Mark disagreed. She lost everything she built. Sometimes that's the worst punishment there is. I glanced at the buildings behind me, the classrooms full of laughter, the families walking nature trails that now crisscross the land. I realized something that evening. This was never just about saving my land. It was about what we choose to build when we're handed the pieces. My phone buzzed. Mark, heard today that 3 other counties are adopting your conservation center model. You started something, Ethan. I smiled and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The beams of the center caught the fading sunlight, glowing gold in the evening air. Grandpa was right. This land didn't just grow trees. It grew justice. It grew second chances. It grew a future one I could be proud of.